he did what Labor said couldn't be done. He stopped the boats and stopped the drownings. If Europe had a Scott Morrison, it would not now be overrun with illegal immigrants, and 3-year-old Aylan Kurdi would not have drowned off a Turkish beach. Scott Morrison is now the Social Services Minister and joins me. Thanks for your time. Can Europe stop the boats like we've done here?
Well, I think the situations are quite different, but there are similar themes that you try and follow in those circumstances. I mean, we had the advantage of geography with what we were doing, and we obviously leveraged that to our maximum advantage. But the first thing you have to acknowledge in dealing with any of these issues is that at the end of the day, you've got people smugglers running trades, and you've got to try and smash up their business model. Now, we did that to circumstances in our part of the world, and it really is a big challenge for those on the other part of the world where this really has escalated to a level where it would be very hard to get it under control now, I think.
And is there a security concern there? I saw one of the Spanish ministers say the Islamic State could be infiltrating some of these columns of refugees. Do you see that as a real threat?
Well, you just got to work the percentages. Even if it's a small percentage, then it's a real threat, and that's always the risk. I mean, there's never, I think, any suggestion that 30–40% of people who are moving around are going to be at risk of that type of behaviour. It doesn't take that. It only takes a very small percentage, and as a result, that risk always presents when you've got mass movements.
Assimilation. The government says it will take in 12,000 refugees from Syria and Iraq. We took in people from the Lebanese civil war, and 11 people of Lebanese families since been jailed for terrorism offences. How can you be sure that you're not repeating that terrible mistake?
You have to get these selection processes right, and the 12,000 we intend to take, that's certainly what we intend to do. To give you an example, over the last 2 years, I mean, yes, we stopped the boats, but we also started the process of reforming our refugee and humanitarian intake. And of the last 2 years, we took almost 8,000, around 8,000 humanitarian entrants and refugees from Syria and Iraq. We weighted that intake substantively, overwhelmingly, to the persecuted minorities, which are obviously...
As in Christians?
Largely the Christian minorities, overwhelmingly the Christian minorities. That was at over 70%. Now, we were still obviously taking groups from other faiths and other persecuted groups, and it's not about what they believe or not believe. That's not the point. The point is we're going to be resettling 12,000 people who not only won't be able to go back in their lifetime, but future generations won't ever be able to go back from those persecuted Christian minorities. And as a result, we're in a place to offer permanent visas and permanent resettlement, which offers a whole new life, not just for them, but the generations that follow.
But I'm talking about really the difficulties of assimilating people from very different faiths, and whether you've learned from the mistake of the Fraser years. For example, I don't know, we've got much better at that. We've had Afghan refugees now joining the Islamic State, Mohammed Barialai and Nouman Haider, for instance.
Well, when you have people coming in an unregulated way, coming in an illegal way, then you're going to have those problems, and that's what the previous government faced with the onset of those who came by boat, and you're not making any selections there. And we've just completed a study of over around 2,300 people have come through the program since 2013. They've now been given permanent visas, and it's a mixture. It's those who've come through the proper process, but there'll be some in there who came and were given permanent visas by boat from the previous government. Now, what we see there is almost 90% of them, their primary source of income is government payments, and that's particularly New Start and youth allowance. It's not the pension or particularly the DSP. Only a third of them have been able to complete high school or have a trade or university qualification, and a staggering 15% have never been to school at all. We've got issues in terms of having employment. That's only down at around about 6%, and we've also got language challenges. I mean, just under half do have serious language challenges, and they have to be addressed. Now, the good news is that when we work the program, when we work the process, people feel very welcome and very supported. But it's not an easy thing to resettle people from these places.
But it sounds like you're, in fact, Scott, isn't the danger then that you're in fact importing an underclass, and that leads to its own problems. Have you in this research checked out whether people of Christian backgrounds do better here than people from non-Christian backgrounds?
Well, there's been some earlier research which has gone across a range of different groups, and that's looked at it by geography and things like that. And all I can say to that, Andrew, is their experience is pretty mixed, and that's why the Settlement Services program is so important. I think there's a great confusion out there that people think settlement, taking refugees, is you let them just come and they, pitch a tent somewhere and that's all you have to do. I mean, that's what's happening in many parts of Europe at the moment. People pouring across borders, and people are comparing those numbers with what we do in Australia. We resettle people here. We get them into school. We try and get them into jobs. We teach them English. We help them to integrate and assimilate into the Australian community. And we've been very successful relative to the rest of the world on this. We're heralded as the best resettlement service provider in the world.
And
but
yet
you don't
we still
abuse
have
that
had
record.
all these problems. I think there's a great concern about Christians versus non-Christians, the various success rates. But listen, can I just divert into more newspaper reports today quoting unnamed critics of the Prime Minister, even ministers, saying a change to Malcolm Turnbull is inevitable and a challenge could happen even this week. What's going on here?
Well, I don't know, and if I'm not part of anything that I would know about. So, I mean, I support the Prime Minister. Everybody knows that, so I suspect they're not talking to me.
Sounds like the Turnbull camp is trying to do its best to make sure the Canning result is terrible for the Prime Minister and therefore feed their argument for replacing him.
Well, I think that's just more speculation, Andrew, and this is just this incessant insider speculation and outsider speculation and gossip, and I don't propose to entertain it or give it any oxygen. The Prime Minister knows where I stand, and I think so do the Australian people.
Now, Immigration Minister Peter Dutton last week said correctly that Fairfax newspaper and the ABC newspapers and the ABC were on a jihad against the government. This week, proof, Scott. Dutton was caught telling a private joke to you and Tony Abbott about the meeting this week of Pacific leaders on climate change running late. Have a listen.
Take your time. That's just like take your time. I tell you, we had a bit of that up in Port Moresby. Oh yeah. Anyway, it was a good meeting.
Where was it? Moresby?
The time wasn't anything. We were about to be, have water up at the
Now, you were the one smart enough to see there was a boom mic there, but look, Fairfax, the ABC Labor beat this up into a terrible insult, this bigotry, it's mocking global warming. Liberal supporters are sick of you guys playing the punching bag in this instead of coming out on the front foot and saying, get a grip. You are the best communicator in the government. What would your tip to Peter Dutton be?
Well, it's not for me to give anyone tips. My colleagues, do their jobs incredibly well. But what I'd say is this: I was very disappointed about the media's focus on that particular day. There, on that day, we had brought together community leaders from right across the spectrum, and we were working together on how to best to, humanitarianly settle 12,000 people. And that should have been the focus, I would have thought, of their attention. There were many issues of detail that needed, I think, some amplification, and we were seeking to do that. We held a very long press conference later, but people seemed to be more interested in viral YouTube videos that were going off the back of a boom mic story. That said, Peter is obviously regrets any great offence that has been caused in the Pacific Island community. We work very closely with Papua New Guinea, Nauru in particular, but all of those islands, and if they've taken great offence from that, which I suspect they have, and some have articulated that, Peter has also been making some comments apologising to them. Now that's between us and those individuals, but you're making a different point, and that's about the media. And look, I thought Friday was a very serious day. We had a very important agenda. There was great praise for the Prime Minister's
apologise, for heaven's sake. This is exactly what gets Liberals so... it's all bull. What the media won't say is that studies show that most Pacific atoll islands are in fact stable or even growing in size, not drowning. And what's a joke?
Andrew,
why don't you have the guts to say so?
With respect, I think you're missing the point. This was about whether we have caused offence to some people in our Pacific Islands who we work closely with. Now, whether you agree with them or don't agree with them, whether any of us do or don't, the issue there is there's some offence taken by some people we work closely with, and a good minister, as Peter is doing today, will go and seek to repair any potential damage that might have been caused by that, because that's what a good, sensible minister... It's not about climate change, it's actually about the relationship.
So you turn a complete beat-up and professional offence-taking into another the story about, oh, how you've stuffed up. I mean, I just think it's wrong.
Well, I disagree, Andrew. What we're doing is addressing an issue that might have arose for a relationship between governments, and that's what responsible ministers do.
Well,
if the
good
media
point.
wants to carry on about all of the rest of it, well, I think that's their fault necessarily, and if we could have avoided that, well, that's also things that we have to consider. But at the end of the day, good government, good ministers deal with the issues in front of them, and that's what we were doing on Friday, and,
No, good on you.
people got distracted by something else.
Scott Morrison, thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Coming